And so, let us meet, joined in the revelation of being. Let us meet in the surrendered revelation and joy of being, in that which is true. Let us not be distracted by the great misunderstanding, however big and shiny and alluring it can be. Let us rest here now, surrendered in the being that is simple and true and free. Let us rest in the love that is longed for, that is always here without conditions. Let us explore our own nature and all of the misunderstandings, ideas, beliefs, and concepts, and carry them deep into the being, where the luminosity and clarity of truth can reveal the obscurations and the misunderstandings. There is so much that is unconscious, so much that is unconscious, and it can be shocking to the mind to even have an inkling of how deeply delusional and unconscious it is. But the nature of the mind is that it is delusion. It is egocentric patterning. It is protection. Nothing that the mind believes is truth. Nothing that the mind believes is truth. And yet the subtle manipulative ways that mind will try to create a way to tell the story, a way to disrupt truth, a way to subtly manipulate in order to be heard and be seen. And so it is only when we are free of mind that we can see the great distortion that is really the collective consciousness. It's heartbreaking on a certain level, but it can only be seen when we are resting in the clarity and luminosity of pure awareness that can illuminate. When we are resting in this truth, we are not pulled to conform, and there is no fear of speaking that truth. Shining the light, being a way shower. Of course, that can only happen when there is no fear and need to be seen and need to conform. It creates disturbance. It creates disturbance in the patterns and conditionings and habits of the ego that are deeply conditioned to stay in what is familiar and unconscious, right? The way to illuminate all that is unconscious is to welcome it openly into the light, welcome it to reveal itself, welcome it to tell its story, to create its ripples of drama, to reveal its subtle manipulative ways and the ways that it wants to be heard, the ways that it wants to sabotage truth, the ways that it wants to make truth wrong. But the more that we welcome all of these kind of energies into the light, into the love, we are welcoming these energies into the peace of being and the love that is truly longed for. It might not be comfortable. It will likely not be comfortable, for the egocentric patterning to be disturbed. But truth is here to disturb. Truth is here to send the most ginormous ripples into the egocentric patterning. For the ones that are truly longing for freedom, the disturbance, the ripples, the destabilizing and collapse of egocentric patterning is the way to truth. And truth will uphold what is truth. Will keep shining the light. Whatever ego sense thinks about it is completely irrelevant, because it does not know love. It does not know truth. It does not know anything, but it thinks it does. And it secretly, subtly wants to be right. And it wants to exert that self-righteousness in subtle, manipulative ways. The ways that it just wants to be heard, right? So we're speaking this to the laws of nature. We're speaking this to the laws of nature that in truth are not really wanting to move in these kind of patternings, because the greatest longing of all consciousness is to evolve into its greatest shining divinity. And so this invitation is a constant invitation to meet and rest in the love, in the shining clarity, in the truth that cannot be spoken, can only be known in the heart. And this speaking is to say to those laws of nature that they will not be given what they want. They will not. And that is the greatest love. The greatest love is when the egocentric patterning is not fed another spoonful of candy, another spoonful of tiptoeing around these kind of patternings. If we are here for truth, then as we come to realize truth, it becomes impossible to collaborate with that which is not true. And the more that we come to be the living luminosity of pure awareness, it is so clear, the unconscious patterning that is happening. So we have to be so willing within our own direct experience to explore ourselves, explore the conditionings, explore the ways that there are beliefs and concepts where the mind wants to believe the mind, of course. The mind believes that its protective, learned, conditioned ways are true safety. And yet we have to come to a place where we recognize that, has that brought us to freedom? Is there complete freedom? Is there joy and openness and clarity? Because if not, that it is just a gracious sign to keep exploring what is in the way. When there are these patterns that are ready to collapse, they will create situations in order to bring a reflection. Now the heart knows truth. And so when a reflection comes, or some kind of pointing comes, the way that life naturally just points, the heart knows what is true. But is there the humility to let go of what the ego wants to hold on to? Is there the humility to let go into the surrender, the natural surrender that says yes to the being, yes to the truth of the heart, and illuminates the conditioned habits and patterns that are just wanting to pull the attention back into the distortion, because that distortion it's a flow of repulsion, right? It's flowing away from the divine. And curiously, it will act as a sabotaging energy for the flow of attraction. And so where we see this within our own functioning, and where we see this or feel this within the environment around us, it is to illuminate it by not flowing into the flow of repulsion, not leaving yourself, not leaving the truth of your heart. There are so many ways that this can play out in the life. And it is, in a way, a gradual wearing down of the conditionings that are so afraid to not conform, that has all these ideas, well, I have to. This is the way it is. But until we start exploring this, there is nothing gracious about living in accord with a collective consciousness that is delusional, right? There is nothing gracious about living in accord with a collective consciousness that is delusional. Nothing. It will make the ego maybe feel safe and comfortable, to find a comfortable little position within a collective that is inherently sick and imbalanced, distorted, right? So be with these things, contemplate these things. These words are here to disturb. They're here to make waves. They're here to bring a sense of discomfort, because you do not wake up and come to freedom in your comfort zone. Does not happen. Impossible. What was that language? I nearly transitioned into Spanish there, I think. So, impossible, right? There it is. It's absolutely impossible to be living clarity, wide openness in the truth of being, in a heart that is closed, and conforming and collaborating with these ways that the mind thinks, well, this is normal, this is what I have to do. This invitation is really an invitation to explore yourself, because it doesn't actually matter to anyone else but you, right? It doesn't matter. You can stay where you are, and you can collaborate and create the most comfortable life and live it out until death comes, and then come back in and do it all again. It's totally okay. But if the impulse in you is for freedom, if there is this live wire, this live spark in you, then be with what is being invited. Be with these words. Be with what is stirred up. Explore within your direct experience. To be the being is just a part of this whole unfolding. Or we could say to be the being and to know the being, but to actually live as the being and not live in these glimpsed flashes. So many beings speak of, oh, well, I had to go and do this thing, or I have this thing happening. So then it's as if there's these divided lives. When I'm in my family, when I'm with my job, when I'm in this, so that I've got this happening, I've got this happening. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's happening. You are always the being, always the being. And in fact, the grace of this unfolding is to be the being, no matter what is happening on the surface of life, because the play is irrelevant. The play is only here for your freedom. So if you are playing in the play in order to create a comfortable position, that is not the way to open to freedom. And the mind might say, well, I don't care. Well, okay. So these words are not for you. It doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter. But stop complaining. Stop complaining. Stop complaining about the misery and the suffering. If there is misery and suffering, if there is stress, then find out why, because your mind is at the root of it. Stop projecting blame. Stop adding to the problem. Stop collaborating with the seeming problem that the collective consciousness thinks there is, and discover that there is no problem in truth, right? It's to find the subtle ways of collaborating, that the only problem is a mind that is committed to believing itself. There is only one self, and it is the wide open living resonance of truth that your heart knows. Your heart knowing this is the one heart. We're letting off some fireworks. The thing about fireworks is they make a big bang, but my goodness, aren't they so beautiful? The beauty of grace, the beauty of light, right? We cannot expect to live this truth without change happening. Things have to be shaken up. Things have to change. We don't have to start discarding everything. We're just living in accord with life, aligned with life, recognizing that whatever happens is inviting us in this moment to find out, how is there only one here? Can I find that whatever is happening, and however disturbed or discordant this moment feels, can I find the peace? Can I make my way through the quagmire, the mire, the stickiness of the mind and its beliefs and concepts, and find the deep-rooted peace and oneness that is the revelation of being? Can I live this life surrendered as life, constantly, perpetually surrendering into itself? Can I live this life surrendered, not as someone who's surrendered, but being the surrendered life, being the flow of surrendered life? And the flow of surrendered life is not a person that's doing this or that or thinking this or that. The flow of surrendered life is just a flow of life that is moving as a divine choreographed river of grace, appearing as all of life in order to create the appearance and reflection so that every being has the possibility to be free. There is such graciousness and kindness, compassion in the willingness of this divinity to flow in order for creation to appear, so that we can see through the illusion, the maya, the delusion, the stickiness and come to be utterly free of the whole delusion and appearance, and know the shining radiant truth of the being. Now we come to this in the silence, in the stillness, by stopping. Stop what you are doing. Stop all of the ideas of I have to and I should and I must and I'll just do this. Stop. Everything else can wait because it's completely irrelevant. But God, the glory of your true nature, the revelation, it cannot wait. You have no idea how long your body is going to last for this possibility of the revelation in this lifetime, to know the grace of the eternal life and to come to the shining freedom. Now, these words will only be received in true listening. They cannot be heard with the mind, because these words are speaking to consciousness, consciousness speaking to itself. It's not about saying things that please the mind. It's not about saying things that make the me or the mind feel anything but totally disturbed and shaken up, right? It's about consciousness speaking to itself and saying, you are pure divine wholeness. Stop pretending and masquerading and dancing these small dances. Stop. Stop right now. If there is an impulse for freedom, if you can feel any resonance at all in these words, if you come to this moment wholehearted, then receive the grace and stop the half-hearted meanderings. Stop. Be here fully for yourself. Be here fully for yourself. The divine already knows its divinity. These words are coming for the beings that feel like they are stuck and struggling and are called to freedom and are longing to be free of the struggle and the patterning and conditioning. It is consciousness speaking to itself to say directly, this is the way. The way is to stop, be still, and discover in the stillness the purity of your true essence nature. There is no doing here. There are no instructions for the mind. There is nothing whatsoever here for the me. We are here meeting at a finer, deeper frequency than the mind can understand. And yet, because the words are mostly English, the mind that speaks English can understand, right? But the mind that can understand means nothing. It means the possibility of more concepts and more sense of, oh, I've got that, I'm doing okay, I'm on the right track. It can mean more of that, but all of that is irrelevant. What is important here is what is listening. And true listening is not hearing with the ears, with the mind and the me. True listening is the open, awake awareness, the pure, receptive awareness that can receive the invitation and grace to rest, to simply stop and rest and just be here. Just be here right now. Be yourself. Freedom is not in the future. Freedom is here now. We start in this moment. You start where you are as you are, and open to the grace, peace of the true heart. You open to this moment, the being that is here right now. Give up all ideas that you have to work on this or work on that, or you can't quite get it, or you can't quite this. You can, because you already are. Stop pretending, stop denying, and just be here so fully. In the stillness, in the silence that is underlying the moving, changing, where you can feel the sense of simple presence, where you can feel the awareness that is simply aware. In the still presence, there is a sense of simply being here, a deep relaxation and a sense of familiar openness. Just being. It's not about what the mind is thinking. It's not about the next thought. It's not about the future. And it's most definitely not about the past. It is the addiction and the conditioned habit to constantly reference the past because the nervous system is clogged up with stress from the past. Now that is innocent, and we have no way of changing that except to be fully present with it. But we have to stop referencing the past and keep playing out the old tunes. It's like cranking up a gramophone, right? We crank up the gramophone, get out the violin and start playing the stories of the past. But this invitation is to stop playing the repeating story. Be here. Be here. Feel the sense of being. And if there is disturbance in the field, it is to be so present with the disturbance. Because that disturbance is the stress in your nervous system. It is the unconscious, ready and surfacing, wanting to come to the light, because the consciousness itself is recognizing that there is a purity, that it just wants to release its stresses and patternings and holdings and come to the purity. So let us not stop that natural unwinding, that natural unfolding by pushing it back down again, because the me says, I don't want that to be seen. I don't like what's happening, right? This unfolding, the ability, the adeptness to rest in the being and live this awakeness only happens when we can face the past without replaying it. And that is to face the mind without replaying it. That if it's appearing not as a mistake. And the mind's protection will say, oh no, not that, push it away, or try to numb it and find a different experience. It will attempt to distract. But if it's appearing, it's about being so present with it, being the loving presence that it is all longing for, so that it can be met, in the unconditional presence and holding by that which knows it's all innocent and impersonal, right? So as we come to the being, the felt sense of being, consciousness invites itself to remember the truth of who you are, remember the openness, the freedom, the simplicity, the deep peace of being yourself. Remember the silence, the unmoving, unchanging. It is an invitation to attune with the finer frequency. And the finer frequency is in the resonance of truth. And now, even as words that are strong, and even as fireworks are going off, the heart can still feel the truth. Even if there's a sense of being stirred in the ego patterning, the heart recognizes the resonance of truth. In fact, the heart, it is enlivened and it feels grateful. It feels grateful for such a direct invitation. And so it doesn't matter what the mind is thinking. We don't need to give any airtime. We don't need to tell everybody what the mind is thinking. It does not matter. And the deeper we come in, we have to recognize that it does not matter what the mind is thinking. To keep collaborating with what the mind is thinking is to just keep allowing those subtly manipulative patterns to keep playing out, right? We know that the mind has got plenty to say, and if it is allowed, it will reveal its plentiful basket of ideas and concepts and beliefs. But we're not here to hear what the mind has to say about it all. We're here to meet in the revelation and to not give that wiggle room to the mind. Now, it will try anyway. It will continue to try. But the more that you can hear these words in truth, in the deep listening of the aware being, there's the recognition that the only place that what the mind has to say is useful is within your internal experience that faces that within and says, am I going to listen to the mind or am I going to rest in the being? Because as soon as you say, oh, the mind says, you're listening to the mind and you're trying to assert separation. You're trying to assert that. Even if there's a sense of saying, oh, but I know the being. In truth, in the moment of speaking, the mind says, you don't know the being. You're asserting the ego patterning. You're asserting, right? Can you see that? Can you see that mechanism? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. At some point, there will be a dawning that sees that. Now, if it slips forward, it's not the end of the world. It's just a sign. It's just a sign to say, okay, so the mind is dominant right now, right? Come to the being, illuminate it. The way that we reveal these patterns of mind is that we welcome it all. We welcome it. But the welcoming doesn't then collaborate with it, right? It doesn't then dance in to the next thought. It doesn't make that feel comfortable. It illuminates. Is that true? So what is true? Right? This is the constant invitation, is to see through everything that the mind wants to present as truth, to see that it's a misunderstanding. Now, when we meet, we are often meeting these edges, right? Where the mind and the me brings forward. It's where the edge is, where the working edge is. But the invitation is to just notice. Notice if you can recognize what is being pointed to. And it doesn't matter if not, but these words have to come, right? Maybe you can feel why these words have to come. We have to go deeper. We have to invite the next deepening. We have to invite the exploration within your internal process to be such that can reveal the mind. And so not need to assert the mind, right? Now, it also doesn't make sense to feel like, oh, now I can't say anything and I just have to stay quiet and I have to be guarded and be careful what I say. No, not that either, because that is a mind's protection. And we're here for truth. The invitation is truth. Take the risk. Take the risk of a pattern being illuminated. Take the risk of the mind trying to assert itself and being revealed. Take the risk for the sake of freedom. Take the risk of being wrong, right? Because when we take the risk of being wrong, we open up all the doors and windows and say, okay, bring it all forward. Bring it all forward, right? Not conforming, not afraid. Let whatever thinks that it's got a case here, whatever thinks that it's got something true to say here, let it come forward. Let it bring itself forward. Let it not be sneaky behind the scenes. Let it come forward and reveal itself. And let's find out if it's true. Let's bring those beliefs forward into the peace and love of the being, right? Let's take the risk of being wrong. Let's take the risk of being humbled. Let's take the risk out of the protection of separation. Let's take the risk in the true safety of deep presence that is not here with any sense of right or wrong, but is just here present, inviting truth, inviting a meeting in the truth, right? Not speaking the truth, but shining the light, the living light of just being, and inviting all beings that feel to be in any kind of separation, to be here wholeheartedly, to really feel what it means to be 2 feet in, right? Whole self in. That these are not things we want to say flippantly on the surface of life, because it's about following it through within your direct experience. It's all about being honest with yourself. There is no one else judging you or holding you accountable. You already are the divine wholeness. You already are the simple being. It's all about what's happening in your nervous system in this moment. The self is speaking to itself because it only knows itself. The resonance is singing its song, its silent song, in the appearance of words, because that's the play, right? The play is an appearance of silence, of the divine wholeness, appearing to be diverse and fragmented, but never diverse and fragmented. Never in truth, right? So this invitation is to say, you are divine wholeness. You are one with all that is. You are the purity. If that is not known, in this moment, find out what is in the way within your direct experience. Do not be looking for someone else to do that for you. And do not imagine that it is in the future. In this moment, find out what is in the way. What is the distraction? If there is one, and if there is not, then shine and sing the silent song through the resonance of resting in the depth of silent being, in the surrendered revelation of the being that you are. Come wholeheartedly to this gathering. Come wholeheartedly to yourself, right? Now, the way that these words are coming, the mind could make so many concepts out of what is being spoken. So many concepts. Do not add another concept. Do not add another idea. Feel the resonance of your heart, the heart that knows truth, the truth that cannot be spoken, and open into your own heart that knows the truth. And as you open into your own heart in utter remembering of the simple presence that you are, resonating in the felt sense of being, and know that this is where we are one. This is our meeting, and this is where the true friend is calling you into a depth of companionship where there are no boundaries and edges, no you and me. There is just the glory and love shining in the knowing of the oneness of what is. If there is anything in the way of this revelation, open to find out. It will likely be a thought, could be a body tension. Bring awareness to whatever it is that feels to be contracted or holding. Notice, what is that contraction or holding? What is the energy underneath the thought? What is the energy that might be stirred in the nervous system? Just to notice that the energy is like sensation. The energy is sensation. The sensation is aliveness. The aliveness is the aliveness of presence. And here you are, resting in yourself. Suffering on the surface, stress on the surface, a nervous system that is triggered, spinning. Find out what is this in the nervous system. Sensation. Meet the sensation. Allow the sensation to be here. Do not think about it. Just meet the feelings. If thoughts are trying to vie for attention, be aware of them, watch them, welcome them. Don't try to push them away. Just see them and come back to the felt sense of the sensation, the felt sense of your nervous system, whether it is wildly alive with nectarine bliss, or whether it is stirred or triggered, or whether it just feels like subtle disturbance. Feel the sensation. The sensation brings you to the aliveness. The aliveness is the aliveness of life. Come to the presence of the aliveness. And then here you are present again. Present again. You have distilled the suffering and misery of the surface of life down into the presence of being, and you are resting. If the sensation in your nervous system is the longing for freedom, the longing for divinity, the longing for God, the longing for wholeness, then feel the sensation of the longing, the felt sense, the aliveness. Feel the sensation. As you feel the sensation, notice that it's just the aliveness of the nervous system. The aliveness brings you to presence. Be so present with the aliveness until there is a complete merging of any sense of duality, and feel the oneness of just simply being. So whatever is here, we have the power within our beingness to transmute it. Are you feeling stressed and frozen, afraid? Feel the sensation. You do not have to do anything with the mind with it. Nothing is needed from the mind. And if the mind is bringing in thoughts and concepts, it is just to welcome it. This is how we distill and alchemize the delusion of separation into the remembering of oneness. We use our nervous system, which is essentially consciousness, moving from distortion to purity. We move from person with some kind of story, suffering, stress, delusion, conditioning, concept, fear, anxiety, protection. We move from personhood, egocentric patterning. We move from this personhood through the felt sense to presence, to freedom. We move from being someone that is attached and with story, through the felt sense, through the sensation, through being so present with what's here in the nervous system, to the silence, to the stillness and the emptiness of the wide open field of being that is freedom now. We cannot know the timeless with the mind. We can only come to the felt sense of presence, where we know the timelessness of presence, not someone who is present to something, but deeper, just the felt sense of presence. We merge into one presence of being. And this is the glory where we come together in companionship and we join, we merge, we remember the oneness. Before every meeting, every connection, take a moment to meet in presence the being before you. Whether the being knows it or not, take a moment to come to presence, to come to the being and join with the being or beings in front of you in the oneness. And do not leave whatever happens on the surface. Rest in the truth of the heart. Whatever's playing out, rest in the truth of the heart. There is plenty of opportunity for practice. And this is the grace. The practice is the grace. All of life is the grace. Can you notice in your direct experience in this moment how you are deeper in the being, in the knowing of the truth of your own heart? Can you notice that you are resting deeper? Can you feel the aliveness of the stillness, of the silence? There is still an aliveness in the nervous system when we come to silence, when we come to stillness, but it is not an aliveness that feels like a charge, and it's an aliveness that feels very alive. It can feel very, very full. Sometimes, to start with, it can feel almost too full, so alive that it wants to move the physicality because the aliveness. So the silence can feel very still, and the silence can feel very alive, and it can feel somehow both, like a oneness, right? So it doesn't matter what the direct experience is. Be the being right now. Can you feel the felt sense of that which is undisturbed, undisturbable, never changes, is simply here being and is aware? It can be resonating as the aliveness of life, the flow of the knowing in the heart that says, yes, 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 this. Or it can feel like being like a boulder, like a mountain that's so deep and silent and heavy with stillness. And yet even that stillness is somehow pulsing, buzzing with its own aliveness in the knowing of itself. And so if there is any kind of disturbance in the field, if you're aware of disturbance, just to be aware of it. Notice it in the nervous system as sensation. Just allow the sensation to be here. If on a denser level there's thoughts that are attempting to come in, just watch the thoughts. See it like a movie. Watch it and do not identify. Notice how it's possible to not identify. When you are resting in the being itself never identifies. Attention can wander, but attention wandering is like the outer coating. It's like the presence consciousness. It's as if there is consciousness can come from its purity to a presence consciousness, to a mind consciousness which is limited and distorted. Now the mind consciousness is moving within a limited, very limited pattern. And this is where separation and the delusion is moving, where consciousness is moving. Now presence consciousness is kind of between pure consciousness and mind consciousness. Presence consciousness is aware of the moving, changing, and feels more spacious, but is not completely resting, right? But presence consciousness, witnessing consciousness, still has a sense of spaciousness and freedom. What happens is the presence consciousness, the witnessing consciousness, it still has a subtle attachment to mind, right? It's consciousness that's still, it kind of is starting to feel its unlimited nature. It's starting to feel like, ooh, I got a little space here. Ooh, I can stretch out here. Hasn't quite found its unlimited nature, hasn't quite remembered its unlimited nature. But presence consciousness is saying, wow, I'm present, I'm spacious, got a little stretch on here, but I can see the person. I can still, so there can still be a feeling as presence consciousness is opening. It can feel like presence is still very much associated with the me. At some point, the presence consciousness starts to recognize its own independence, right? The consciousness starts to recognize its own independence, but it can almost like snap back again to the me because it hasn't quite fully remembered its unlimited nature, right? Hasn't quite remembered that it's pure consciousness, pure one with pure awareness. So the way that we often speak about it from personhood is we come to presence, the felt sense of presence and presence consciousness. Now, for some beings that are absolutely tight in the delusion of the mind, just to recognize that there's presence can seem like an awakening, because it's like, oh my God, there's something that's witnessing here. Wow. It's not really the true awakening, but it can seem like, what is that? Because there can be even no knowledge of witnessing. Now, everyone here is aware of the witnessing, right? We've opened to this presence, this witnessing consciousness. It can seem very normal once there's a recognition of witnessing. But this presence consciousness, once there's, in a way, it's not someone recognizing, it feels like someone recognizing, but it's presence itself saying, whoa, what is this? Because the tightness of the limitation, right, is opening to this little bit of a stretch, little bit of stretch, little bit of presence. We're watching, wow, right? So this witnessing consciousness, we can actually hang out in witnessing consciousness for many, many years, feeling like we've got some spaciousness, we've got the ability to be aware. We can identify this presence consciousness with kind of spiritual concepts, but still feel very much like a me that's bound in the me. Because that consciousness has started to open, but it hasn't fully stretched to its limits to discover that it's unlimited, right? So the invitation here is that we keep stretching the presence consciousness. We keep stretching the witnessing consciousness so that the presence consciousness or the witnessing consciousness can actually become fully aware, witnessing and present to itself to such a depth that it's not distracted at all by the me and the mind consciousness, that the mind consciousness essentially for a second collapses completely because there's no attention upon it, that all of the attention of presence consciousness is upon presence, that it just falls open, whoa, infinite, boundless being. And this is what would be called the true awakening. This would be the awakening that brings a very clear recognition. I am not the limited person. Very clear, right? If that consciousness blows open all the way, it recognizes its infinite nature. But what happens is that consciousness opens and then it identifies again. It opens and then it identifies again. It opens to be the presence, the witnessing. It can open a little bit more, oh, and then it identifies again. Opens a little bit more, then it identifies again. But as this process is happening, there's more spaciousness, more presence, more ability to witness. And in that, more ability to receive life and be present with the sensations, right? And there's an inkling that starts, that the presence starts to feel deep enough that there's an inkling, a deeper resting in presence, being the awareness, the ability to witness, the ability to recognize what is untouched, that this part of you, this presence that you are, is untouched. And the consciousness is stretching to remember itself, remember its purity. And the more that consciousness remembers its purity, it purifies itself. And what is that? It's purifying the mind consciousness. It's purifying the limited patterns, right? It's purifying the patterns of limitation, refining itself so that it can open more, and open more. Now, this might sound like it's a progressive opening, and in the play of the surface of life, it kind of is a process. But deep within the consciousness, you already are the truth. And every time you touch presence, you touch like a zing of wholeness, right? Presence, the felt sense of presence, it contains a resonant flavor of the entirety, of the totality. And that's what brings a longing and a pull to go deeper. That's in a way like the impulse the evolutionary impulse to go deeper, to want more, to be longing for that freedom, because we touch that which already knows. So we only long because we already know, and we're trying to work out. In one way, we're in the fog of the mind, but we can feel this deep sense. And we're trying to stay in contact with this sense of that which already knows. And that's why the longing is like a way to come into the sense of the divine within. It's why the aliveness of presence is a way to come to the truth inside, the purer consciousness, and out of the fog, the more that we stay connected with our longing, we're opening to the field of infinite possibility, and we're fixing our longing upon God, right? It's like making a dream board and writing God only upon it, not like, oh, a new car, some new shoes, a nice holiday, you know. You don't write all of that on it, you know, like a new kitchen, right? You get your dream board and you just write God. One pointedness, right? Nothing else matters, just this. It's like that. This is what happens in consciousness. But what tends to happen in our consciousness is, as it's opening, we're like, oh, I can feel the spark. I want only this. I want only this. Oh, but now I'm conditioned and I'm pulled and I'm going to play out this on the surface. Oh no, I got lost. I forgot. Come to satsang. Oh yeah, I remember. Okay. I'm in, never leaving again. I'm never leaving again. I'm right here. I'm right here. Only God, only God, only God. Oh no. What happened, right? Because that spark of consciousness that knows its purity, when we align here and we join here in the oneness, we're in the revelation, we're in the celebration, and the revelation is as deep as it's gone within your direct experience. You're as deep in as you've opened, and it feels like wholeness. It feels like, okay, this is it. It's done. It's over. No more person. No more forgetting. And then, what happened? But the grace is that this is how consciousness refines itself, right? It's not personal. It's not someone forgetting. And this is why we don't want to push away whatever happens, right? Because it's all consciousness saying, here's the infinite field of possibilities. The gaze is fixed upon the divinity. It's in that flow of divinity. But where there are these limited patterns, consciousness gets pulled into the groove of limitation in order to move in the limitation, create a reflection, see the reflection. I got caught. Receive the reflection, transmute through the nervous system the stresses, and unravel that limited pattern of consciousness. And here you are back in again. Oh yes, good. I'm here, I'm open, I'm free. Yes, I know that which is never touched. This is good. Now I'm never leaving. I'm done. This is it. I'm in, right? This is the miracle of it, is that when you're in, you are it. And yes, we could say there's finer and finer, but that's an infinite unfolding. At some point, there's a hook that really releases, but there's still within our lived experience, as long as we have a body, refinement that's taking place. But what we know is that the refinement that's taking place is for the whole. It's not personal. There's nothing personal. There's no story in it, right? So this is what is happening, and what a joyous revelation we're in right now, because we started out with some very dense energies in the field that we had to let off the dynamite, right? We let off the dynamite with the fireworks, right? We didn't just blast it with dynamite. We brought in the grace that had a light show simultaneously. That's the grace of fireworks, is that the dynamite blasts, but the grace brings a knowing in the heart that says, wow, that feels like dynamite blowing something apart. But what incredible grace is this truth in the heart, right? So we let off the dynamite, and the sparks of light in the heart of remembering. If we stay aligned and we don't get all tangled up with the feisty mind, getting bogged down with the dynamite and feeling all kind of victimized patterns, if we actually just let the dynamite blast and we open to the grace of the light and the resonance that is in the heart that knows and recognizes truth, then we just let go of that chunk of cheese and we just revel in the glory of what is true. And we open as consciousness, in consciousness, to this gorgeous landscape of revelatory refinement, right? This is the beauty of what is unfolding. This is the beauty of what is unfolding. That it doesn't matter whatever weather pattern comes in, the sun is always shining. And at some point the weather pattern passes and the sun shines. We could say in the eternal sunshine of a heart that knows the truth, right? You remember this phrase, the eternal sunshine of the spotless heart, right? It's a very wise and beautiful expression. The eternal sunshine of the heart that is clear, resting in the knowing of the being, knowing the eternal nature, that it doesn't matter what weather patterns come in, it doesn't matter what plays on the surface, that the spotless heart knows that it is always clear and luminous, and the luminosity of this remembering can shine the light of the eternal sunshine even during a weather pattern, right? That it doesn't matter if our direct experience is a misery or a refinement that feels like a tornado or midwinter or monsoon season. It doesn't matter whether it's hailing, snowing, raining, just foggy for a month. It doesn't matter, because the eternal sunshine of the pure heart of knowing is always shining, and it's not waiting for the sunshine to come again. It's resting in the sunshine. And yet what happens is that, of course, everything that comes and goes is moving and changing, and so the weather pattern passes and the sun shines on the surface of life. And then there's this sense of accord. Now, the more that we live in the eternal sunshine of this heart that is alive in the knowing of itself, knowing only itself, that we don't even notice weather patterns. We could say that we have to then change. We have to change the metaphor then, because the weather patterns are not even weather patterns, because the oneness, we go before even that, right? That it's, we recognize the essence, that what, by virtue of what does the sun shine? By virtue of what does rain fall? By virtue of what do clouds seem to appear? By virtue of what divine grace does night and day seem to happen, right? We go right before even the sun and weather patterns. We go right before, in the true spotlessness, the true clarity of the eternal nature, in the oneness of divine wholeness, that there's an undisturbable truth that the heart knows. And everything that we're moving through in our lived human experience is humanity's evolution to remember divinity. That we're not even really evolving into a bigger and better humanity. We're really evolving out of humanity, right? It's like the weather patterns not coming to be the sun, but evolving out of egocentric patterning and protection. We're evolving out of the tangle of collective consciousness that's tangled. We're evolving to remember the light, to be the one light of divinity, right? And it doesn't matter what the mind says about, oh, well, I'm actually just wanting to have a nice life. It's like it doesn't matter. You're still in this whole process because it's all one. It's just, how deeply do you recognize this? How deeply can you feel the truth resonating in the heart? Because the depth that the truth resonates in the heart is where you want to fall in. You want to fall into the clarity of the depth of recognition, which is in the resonance, right? So this is why we have to speak the full spectrum of the process of refinement. And we speak the full spectrum of consciousness, its limitation, its patterning, its refinement, its unraveling, its alchemizing itself. And we speak to what is prior to consciousness, because this is how we illuminate the way. We bring every being to the possibility of remembering this within your own direct experience, right? We have to uphold and meet in the deepest possible revelation. There is something spoken in the Bible that says, when one or more gather in my name, then I am present, right? In a way, this is what satsang is. And satsang doesn't have to be a gathering like this, but when one or more, when the one, let's say when there's a sense of being one and other, when you gather as one and other, if your focus is in presence, then you join and you meet in the holiness of the oneness, in the joining, in the meeting, in the recognition. It's like then the beam of divine wholeness comes in. And the beam of divine wholeness comes in where there's this sincerity, and it burns away the dross, and it moves as consciousness to create the dynamite blasting and the appearance and the reflection, so that the joining that we are truly only here for, that all beings are only here for this truth, all beings, whether they know it or not, that when we meet in this, we know that the presence of God is here, that the presence of divine wholeness is here, and we have this possibility to attune with that as deeply as we can within our own direct experience. But what we know is that it's here, the divine is here, and if we align and stay attuned with the flow of attraction, where we're saying yes and yes to the being, and recognizing the presence as the presence of the divine. The more that we rest here, we start to, within our direct experience, recognize what God is, what holiness is, and that it's very far away from what we once conceptually thought it was, right? So before you meet with any being, take a moment to remember who you are. Take a moment to remember and join and feel the holy presence of the one that we all belong to. In simple language, for ones that don't maybe know what the human life is truly for, what every being does know is that they long for love, that they long for happiness. And we could say a love or a happiness that never leaves. And that's where this truth is alive in all beings. However deeply it is stuck in the Maya and in the delusion, the longing of every heart is the same. And so when we meet any and every being before us as ourself in the oneness, we are, without words, meeting in a depth of presence and love that every being is longing for. And there's so much beauty that happens with any and every being. To meet every being as yourself, to meet every being as God, right? To see only God before you, to see only this great truth shining before you, whatever the appearance is, that there is this ability to just join in your own direct experience with the being and align with whatever's in front of you, to just align. Let the play, but know the truth in your heart. We could say that the deeper that we open to this, it's like we come to, as a vehicle, have a divine responsibility to hold the finest frequency of consciousness. That when we are gathering with our companions and families, that our duty is to hold the finest frequency for the gathering, right? Now, this is not a mental idea, but if you can feel what is being spoken here, you'll start to notice that it becomes like a duty that can't be avoided, that you will be moved in any situation. If you're willing to collaborate and be a vehicle of truth, you'll find that you're moved in any situation to uphold the frequency of presence, of love. Now, as soon as you collaborate with the flow of repulsion, then you've left yourself and you're just dancing out, you're in the delusion. But if the deeper that we go in, you'll start to notice that it feels painful and almost impossible to act out. You might start to notice that if you start to try to have a conversation that tries to just agree, that you'll start to spin and feel hot or something, and that you have to let the truth be spoken that says, well, I don't agree with that opinion. Or just something gentle that might say, Everyone's different, right? Everyone has their way. Let's let everyone just be in their own journey, right? That doesn't start judging and gossiping or whatever, right? There's so many subtleties to it. But as we open more deeply, we are asked within our direct experience to hold the resonance of truth, to rest in collaboration. And it will bring an invitation for your relationships and way of being to constantly refine. And it's grace indeed for our way of being to constantly refine, to be within our direct experience and to be constantly watching and refining the ways that we move. And are we in presence? Are we resting?